This is the System Failure Podcast number 48.
Yep. All right, 48. That's pretty good, Brian.
Yeah, how are we doing today, Nate?
Good. Looks like the weather's finally turning around. It was raining this morning. It was raining virtually all week, but it seems that the weather has turned around just in time for the weekend, so that's always a happy coincidence in the summer, eh?
Well, it is that nice time of summer when it's, like warm, but not like 90 degrees. So,
I'm sure we'll have some dog days of summer left to go. It's only early August, but that was always small consolation to me when it'd be the summertime and you're growing up and you'd have the sword of Damocles hanging over your head about having to go back to school in September. And especially when we went to private school and you had to wake up at 5:45 in the morning. It'd just be terribly sleep deprived for months on end. So I just remember the panic would really set in when July turned to August because there was no more buffer zones to pad your emotional well-being, no more buffer months like August. You were really up against it, and you could just feel the cold steel of another school year scraping across your neck. It gives me the chills to this day.
Yeah. Well, as an adult, though, like going into the fall is awesome because football starts again, and then there's exciting holidays to look forward to.
Yeah,
and
they'll have the pumpkin spice lattes for the for the young ladies wearing their UGG boots and well, I guess they don't wear UGG boots and tights anymore, right? That's all gone by the wayside. But it used to be that
they don't.
Well, I mean, fashions for young people have definitely changed. And so, I'm sure some people still rock the black tights and the UGG boots, but...
Well, maybe the UGG boots have gone away, but I feel like, yoga pants are definitely all the rage.
Well, we can certainly hope so. But you're right, there's a lot as an adult to look forward to, and it's not like your lot in life changes when August changes into September, right? You would still have to suffer through the torment of a 40-hour work week, no matter what month it is. So, you try. I just still feel the leftover residual emotional dread of being sentenced to another 9 months in the salt mines. Come every September.
Well, that feeling of panic sure sets in August, and you just can't believe the way the time is like slipping away.
Yeah.
But now time has slipped away, and I'm in my late 30s. It's unfortunate.
Those 10 years have got behind you, huh?
Yeah, they sure have.
It's been a while since we've had a Pink Floyd reference on this podcast. I'm happy to resurrect the tradition there. That's nice.
Good job.
I think that to a person, the people that we grew up with, we still hang out with some of our denizens from our ivy covered brick clock tower, Dead Poet Society, high school, and I just think every one of them would probably agree to just being insanely overscheduled. I think it was like a millennial thing. Or just our era of parenting. I mean, obviously, there's a whole different era of parenting on now, and I don't think they're any less overscheduled than we were. But holy crap, having like just every hour of your day pre-scheduled for you is just a terrible feeling. And to this day, I just can't stand being scheduled. Like, I just want to be free to not have to cleave to this rigid schedule. It really is a source of consternation for yours truly.
Well, I think the point of private school is to kind of be like boot camp and have it be miserable so that everything else is easier. Although we kind of live in this technological time where like maybe that's no longer necessary.
Yeah. Well, our school famously had as its alumni the first vice president of the United States under Abe Lincoln, and he was replaced with Andrew Johnson for the second term. But for that first term, he was a Maina, just like us.
Well, yeah, Hannibal Hamlin.
Hannibal Hamlin. And the school really reflected the old school transcendental values of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. And Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Like, this was the idea was that you would go to school not to guarantee a livable income in the future, but to transform your mind and your soul, take the unshaped clay of your being and have it molded, with some kind of high-minded aspiration. Now, the name of the man who ran he was like a Bostonian. The name of the man who ran the school districts in the late 1900s escapes me, but the idea was to import that Prussian model of schooling where it was like what you're saying. It was just non-stop. It's based on like rigorous demands of the factory life. The bell rings and you hustle to your next thing, and so you could just see a slow degradation from those glorious 19th century romantic ideals of education to the nakedly camouflaged, the barely camouflaged naked scam that education has become in this day. And you could really see in the old World War II movies, they have the map of Europe and the blood red stain of the Third Reich spreads across it like a red wine spilt on a tablecloth. And you could really see the border happen to our private school when it got taken over by private equity while we were there. They fired the well-loved headmaster of the school and replaced him with a bow tie wearing corporate stooge who reminds me of the monorail salesman from The Simpsons, which is a pretty old reference now. But man, yeah, we sure saw it taken. They just jacked up tuition, and they fired all of the kindly old professors and brought in recently graduated, oftentimes alumni of the school itself, who would accept a really low salary. And of course, this past year, it all came to a head when one of those a young lady they'd hired got busted for sleeping with one of the students, and then they had one of those crazy scandals, and the person had to get thrown out of Hebron Academy, which was our old school.
Well, there was a lot of that. Yeah. There was those kind of scandals were nonstop.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what happens when you fire our calculus professor, Mr. Gunn, who instilled in me a lifelong love of calculus. They fired that guy the year before his pension was supposed to kick in, right? And then they're going to replace him with some person who's 2 years older than the seniors, right, or 4 years older than the seniors, and it's just a recipe for disaster.
It was a shocking move.
Yeah. So why are we talking about education now? I can't remember why we got on this subject, Brian.
Because it's going into the fall here.
Oh yeah, right. Because it's August. That's right. Well, what have you got for fascinating topics to titillate and tantalize our system failure listeners today, Brian?
All right. Well, one thing that's going on is I did buy, a plane ticket to Prague.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh, that's awesome. Prague, eh? And when are you going?
In December.
Wow.
So, I'm going to go to Eternal Weekend, which is
the Magic thing.
A Magic the Gathering tournament.
All right.
A couple of them.
So you've not told me about this. You've waited to the pod to tell me, which is pretty awesome. So how long will you be in the capital Bohemia for?
About a week.
About a week. Wow.
Yeah.
That's going to be awesome, man.
Well, it is my first time, going to Europe.
You've chosen a great destination. And I've only been in Prague for 4 or 5 days myself. But my impression of the joint was that it very much is laid back and kind of hippie-ish and bohemian. Obviously that area was the medieval district of Bohemia way back in the day. One of the most important power centers in the Holy Roman Empire, and in fact, even at times, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. And the people there are just laid back and chill out, and there's a embrace of the weird. I couldn't stop. There was mushrooms spray painted everywhere. For example, I've got some pictures on my phone. One of the hotels is like a mushroom themed hotel, the Mosaic, and it's got brass sculptures of mushrooms on its sprouting from the roof and on the courtyard where you walk up to the front desk. So yeah, it's always been a haven for the weird or the folks who are a little bit they don't conform or cleave to a strict set of standards or rules or something like that. It's a little bit more freewheeling. So I think you're really going to dig the vibe there.
Well, maybe I'll go and not come back.
I shouldn't be surprised to learn that you decided to not come back to Maine, but instead wish to remain among the red terracotta roofs and the gorgeous Gothic architecture of Prague.
Well, I don't really know what to expect, but it should be a fun adventure, and it's always good to, traveling, it stirs the chi. As they say. But I've never crossed the Atlantic, so it'll be pretty exciting.
Dude, yeah, that's going to be wild, man. What's your flight pattern look like?
It goes into Munich,
and
then into Prague.
So, all right, that's not too... Which airline did you
SAS? I can't remember.
I don't even know what that is. Yeah. All right. Well, dude, that's going to be awesome, man. I hope you've got your passport updated. If not, I'd recommend getting after it ASAP because that takes months to get.
Yeah, it is good through 2029.
Oh, so good. All right. Yeah, there you go. And man, you should just expect to have an awesome time. If I were you, I would just get lost in the. I would get a nice strong coffee for yourself in the morning at one of those crazy cafes that's all around Prague, and have a nice strong black coffee. Visit a museum, and or like St. Vitus's or Prague. Do one of those, the bust anything in the morning, and then by evening have a nice dinner. You're going to find the exchange rate is outstanding there. To where your ribeye steak costs you like $14, which is what you'd hope for to pay for a ribeye steak, not $30. So you'll find the exchange rate is a nice benefit to you. Things will cost about 66% what they cost here, or at least that was the case in 2023.
Yeah. Well, the Magic the Gathering tournament, I mean, it's kind of a big tournament, but I'm not really concerned about like trying to make money. It just will be exciting to go there and see those roofs you were talking about.
Yeah. What did you schedule for a hotel or hostel or Airbnb situation?
So just the only thing I don't have yet is the hotel.
I see. Yeah.
I've got the flight and I've registered for 2 days worth of tournaments. So I have to decide about like a hostel or a hotel.
Yeah.
What I want to do there.
Boy, I don't know. I would just, if the rates are at all reasonable at the hotels, that's where I would go. We did an Airbnb in Prague, but there was 2 of us, 2 couples, and we rented this huge set of rooms. It was awesome. There was like 3 locked gates from the street to our door, though. There was like our locked door and then 2 more locked gates. So it was a lot of figuring out which key goes to what. And the hotel just going to have you with a key card. It's going to be much simpler. There's not going to be cleaning fees or trying to get the person to bring your key, whatever. There's a lot of complications.
It looked like it'd be like $300 for like a hotel for the entire time, which
seems pretty reasonable.
It's kind of like a hotel for one night in a recently populous city here stateside.
Yeah, they wanted like $365 when I was driving home from Florida a couple months ago, and back in March I just called some of the hotels that were ahead on the route to see if it would be good to stop, and some Holiday Inn or whatever in New Jersey was like, $350 for the night, $365 I think is what they charged. And I was like, oh hell no, I'm just gonna keep driving, which is what I did. That's a pretty good deal. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Well, that is insane. You're gonna have to take a lot of pictures, and you're really gonna get a huge kick out of Prague. That's a city that I have to get back to. There's a lot of museums left unmuseumed by me.
Well, they've got like a big old castle kind of there in the capital, right?
Yeah. On there, the city is laid out on either side of the Vltava River. And on one side of the Volta River is the famous Old Town Square. There's also a New Town Square. The New Town Square is from like 1100, something like that. It's really weird. The things are called old and new, and they were called old and new in like the 13th century. But there's like the old Prague Square, and there's Our Lady upon Tyne, the famous cathedral the famous dome. It's not really a dome. It's a Gothic church where Tycho Brahe is buried, the Dutch astronomer who had all the data, who worked with Kepler and Copernicus. But anyway, so that has crazy architecture, the Old Town Square, and then you go across the Stevens Bridge, which was constructed when Prague was the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, and there on the hill opposite on the opposite side of the river is Prague Castle, which has the seat of the Czech government still works. You'll see that officials are coming and going. It's like still the old throne room of the Holy Roman Empire is still there, but they also still carry on, modern functions of state out of Prague Castle. So yeah, man, you're gonna have a great time. It's Prague Castle is a hell of a structure. It's got the light. The great story about Prague Castle is, what is the name of the man? He's a famous Czech statesman from the '60s, Václav Havel. He became after the revolution against the Soviets, he became like the leader of Czechia, and he had the Rolling Stones come for a concert at Prague Castle, and and he was sitting around drinking with the Stones after the concert, and they were like, this castle should really be lit up by lights, that shine on the outside of the walls, so that the people can get a good view of Prague Castle at night. And that's what they did. And those, I don't know, I doubt it's the same lights that were in the Rolling Stones used there, but that's the story about Prague. So yeah, that's great. That's crazy, dude. You're going to have an unbelievable time. You should be, whatever your excitement level is, you should double it. It's awesome. It's going to be wicked.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think that, so that brings me to, we'll redirect our efforts now to some more traditional system failure fare.
Some doom and gloom.
Some doom and gloom. That's the word I'm looking for, Brian. Thank you. So I just have this interesting Reddit post. Now, there's a lot of places on Reddit where you can go for like specifically Marxist interpretations of things like r/late stage capitalism. But this is just the r/millennial subreddit, which is our age group, Brian. And so this is a bunch of normies who don't necessarily have a Marxist bent. So this is to me was an interesting barometer of where the mind of regular, like I say, normies who don't have crazy beliefs like you and me, where they stand on the realities facing American society. So, without further ado, I shall read first the body of this post, and then I'll read the 2 top comments just to kind of give a couple perspectives here. And this post is entitled, "Is Everything Going Downhill?" I went to a local amusement park recently, and it was so different. People were saying for years this place was going downhill. But I went recently as 2019, and it was great back then even. Everything seems to have gotten weirder after 2021 and way more disorganized. Just go into an airport if you want to see an example of that. Or if you want to go even deeper, it kind of seems like the veil of the Matrix has finally lifted after the pandemic. And honestly, as I'm getting older, I kind of relate more to Cypher than to Neo when he wanted to go back to the fantasy world. Not trying to be negative, this all just be my own perspective that could be wrong. And that's the post here. And before I read the two top posts underneath it, we'll just remind everyone that Cypher is the guy from the Matrix who coordinated with the agents to betray
he makes
fellow.
a deal with Smith there to dime out Neo.
Yeah, he's eating a steak dinner while he comments to Smith how great it would be just to go back into the Matrix and forget about the horrifying reality which is taking place outside the Matrix. So, okay, so top posts here. The top comment on this post is from Liquefaction Action, who claims to have been born in 1988. I think a lot of things are happening all at once. A polycrisis, if you will. Most, quote, infrastructure, unquote, using, and then in parentheses, using this loosely in both the literal sense and just sort of anything like national park bathrooms, amusement parks, strip malls, roads, park benches, visitor centers, boardwalks, piers, signage, etc. You get the idea of what I'm saying. Close parentheses. So he's saying most infrastructure is getting old and way past capacity that was last upgraded in 1990 at best. Most feels like it was 1980. Seriously, remember what it was like visiting Yellowstone or Zion in 1995 versus 2024? Or the local boardwalk? Or maybe your local favorite campground? At the same time, no one can or wants to invest in capital expenditure upgrades and improvements for a number of reasons. Again, with their parentheses, they're saying that would be too lengthy to get into why we do or can't. Close parentheses. Again, they're saying at the same time, no one can or wants to invest in capital expenditure upgrades and improvements for a number of reasons, but it also means not only are things under capacity and aging, we aren't building new things to also assimilate and spread out the capacity. Simultaneously, management is getting stingier and we're chronically understaffing infrastructure for demand these days. The cost of living has skyrocketed. Consider a house used to be $80K versus $700K today. Insurance, food, healthcare, loans, used car prices, rents, etc. are all through the roof. Benefits are through the floor. Pensions are gone. Employers don't reward employees with a healthy, well-paid environment to stay in. So there's no incentive to stay and retain employees long term. This also leads to cultural decay. If your job doesn't care about you, why the fuck should you care about your job? Like, seriously, the worse you treat your employees and the less solidarity and camaraderie or emotional investment in their job they have, the worse they're going to do. It's the only rational way to behave. So not only are we understaffing, workers aren't paid nearly enough to have a living wage for the cost of living they experience these days, and they aren't given any real, meaningful reasons to not change jobs, which further exacerbates knowledge, expertise, and staff issues. A lot of the disorganization is just management trying to be as cheap as possible without enough knowledge and expertise to go into keeping a tight ship. Simultaneously, most private enterprises are also seeking to extract more profits out of the capacity/existing infrastructure. This means more microtransactions, adding more premium, platinum, golden, pro, plus, genie, pass tickets and tiers for everything while not actually improving anything through CapEx or capital expenditures. It's the tendency for the rate of profit to decline and being made up for by wringing out the consumers and workers. But yes, I think it's pretty objective statement to say everything has been getting worse over time with no signs of turning that around. I also relate with Cypher to some degree. So that's comment number one. The next one's much shorter, but it's interesting that this person has referenced the falling rate of profit. And so I feel like this first poster is familiar with Marxian theory, but it's interesting to see that that's the top most upvoted comment in this highly normal subreddit, eh?
Well, let's this other person have to say, and then we'll get into it.
All right. Next comment from PM Me Your Kitty Pics. It's not just you. Everything is shittier now. I feel like at one time companies cared about customer experience and service and genuinely wanted to provide a meaningful experience. I think people noticed and cared more about their experience as well. Gradually, companies started lowering the bar, keeping wages stagnant, leaning out teams. It must mean leasing out teams. And forcing them to do more with less, cutting expenses on maintenance by ignoring needed repairs or doing bare minimum, subbing in cheaper products, materials, and ingredients. We are seeing the outcome of several iterations of that process. Now, instead of high expectations for quality, we accept mediocrity because we are conditioned to. So let's leave it there. The rest of the comments basically more or less follow suit. And I'm sure you agree, Brian, that the sentiments expressed therein have some analog in your personal life. What do you think?
I guess I'm of two minds about it. Well, on the one hand, the COVID's obviously a disaster, and I think you can just see through it all like grandma's underpants, like what's really going on in that. It's not about making money for the people in charge. It's about the control. Like we've gotten into this in the past, and the COVID was all about the control at the expense of like the economy and everyone's well-being. And so, I mean, that's definitely going on. But I mean, conversely, I think there is a big backlash to that. And we still don't know what to make of this crazy assassination attempt on the Donald. But, you know, they can't call the Donald Orange Hitler anymore. And the crazy geriatric they were trying to cram down our throats has been removed. And they're at least putting out someone there who has the ability to speak somewhat cogently. Although Kamala is so... she sounds terrible if she actually starts talking. And like her campaign message is like a campaign of joy.
Yeah.
And so you can be joyful as they continue to extract, transfer wealth to the upper class or whatever. And I don't know, but there is like a backlash though. And I don't think just progress is like a stock market chart with its ups and downs. And, the COVID was a serious low point. But I don't know. On the other hand, it is hard being a millennial and I work at like an insurance company, and they're just trying to like in this post-COVID world, you have to use like AI rather than like we're used to have like people answering the phones. You kind of have to use AI now because just the amount of inflation, like your insurance premiums, everyone's insurance premiums need to like quadruple basically since the COVID. But no one wants that to happen.
Why? If I could just stop you for 1 second there. Why does everyone's insurance premiums need to quadruple? Is it because...
It's because, if your house burns down, the cost of replacing your house is quadrupled.
Right. And why has that quadrupled? It doesn't have to be in terms of cars.
Well, the COVID just dismantled the economy and all the supply chains. Like, everyone stopped working. And so... just like up and down, like the supply chain, like just people can't get workers and you can't get materials. Just everyone like not working for a couple of years does that, and also just like the incredible like printing of money, like also makes all the materials cost more. So it's just everything about it is a complete disaster for trying to get your house rebuilt after a fire, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a third factor too. There's definitely supply chain disruptions, as you indicated. That's going to decrease the amount of goods available in the market and drive the prices of the remaining goods that make it to market up, of course. And then there's also the inflation, like you say. Anytime you flood the economy with billions and billions of fresh dollars, you're going to see the ratio of dollars to the economy those dollars are supposed to measure is going to be perturbed. But we also saw record corporate profits during the COVID era too, which tells us that it ain't all supply and demand and it ain't all money printing, because you wouldn't see like record profits for oil companies, right? If it was really all just about supply and demand and price inflation, right? You wouldn't see them. You would see profits that were overstated by the amount of inflation, but we've seen profits way over and above the supposed rate of inflation. So that also factors in too, to when you say they must, your venerable employer, which I don't know if I should mention them or not, but they must have AI answer the phone versus an actual person. Now there is a force that makes that they're when you have to show profits to your board of directors, then there is like an incentive where you have to leave no stone unturned to cut a penny wherever you possibly can. So there's that factor too, eh?
Well, when you talk about like corporate profits, like obviously like Wall Street got through the COVID, and oil companies, insurance companies. I mean, they really are like an important glue to a capitalist society, at least to some extent. They're important in that, well, I mean, if you need a job, I mean, you should probably, like, don't work at a friggin' restaurant. Just go get a job at an insurance company and grind away. And, well, it's not the most exciting existence, but on the other hand, you could do a lot worse in terms of trying to get paid. But also, like, I think insurance companies, well, they're just a big part of the economy, and the fact that, like, if your premiums quadruple, like, the insurance companies try to keep a downward pressure on costs, and so and they're powerful forces, and so I mean, I think it kind of stops our reptilian overlords from completely sacrificing us at the altar of whatever of their worship of Moloch or whatever.
You think insurance does this? Like, how does insurance stop us from totally sacrificing our society on the altar of Moloch?
It's just well, because if insurance premiums quadruple, everything's gonna come grinding to a halt. Like people need to get their cars repaired. Like people need to be able to drive to work, to do jobs, right? And I mean,
we need risk mitigation, right? It can't be that a catastrophic thing happens and now you're done and you no longer can work. We do obviously need some kind of risk mitigation. It's a valuable service.
And obviously there's like problems, and like health insurance is like a complete disaster. I mean, I'm not saying that isn't the case. But on the other hand, I mean, there is some kind of glue that's keeping our society together there. And like insurance companies, they like lobby governments about the bills that are passed, and they are like trying to fight to keep your premiums as low as possible, however you feel about them. So, just like institutions. I mean, I just know it because I work in it. But I mean, there are. I mean, I don't think like the NFL wants lockdowns and to have games played in front of empty stadiums. Like they're out there trying to make money, and they make like a lot of money. And so, I mean, the oil companies and the banks are gonna make what they can, but there are like other forces like kind of keeping this thing together. So,
do you know how, broadly speaking, how corporate profits have been in the insurance sector? Since 2020.
I don't, but it just seems like it must be kind of tough sledding. And I'm sure that for a while there, like in auto in particular, like no one was driving, so there were no accidents, and so there was a lot of money for a hot minute there. But as the it's like when something traumatic happens to you, you don't like you don't like feel the pain right away. It's like the next day the things really hurt, right? Yeah. And so I think it's kind of like that. So I don't know the exact profits. And insurance companies are built to like weather the storm, so to speak. So I don't know. But I'm sure it's a challenging time to be in the insurance. It's not like easy sledding, right?
Yeah.
But,
well, I reckon that we definitely need risk mitigation. I just wonder, is that the sort of service that makes sense to provide it, with private companies for profit versus, broadly instituted in a not-for-profit fashion. But that's just my philosophy bleeding through. I see everything through the lens of that philosophy. We'll get more to that later, I'm sure.
Well, to keep it on point, just, I don't know, with like the millennial experience and things getting worse. I don't know. Like, on the one hand, I think, I mean, it's obviously hard being a millennial. Well, I guess it seems like a good time, Zenny, to bring up. So, I was listening to Jonathan Haidt's audiobook, The Anxious Generation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he's been making the rounds on the pods. I can't remember where I heard him, possibly on a JRE like last month or something.
Well, I've only listened to like the first chapter, but his opening salvo is, that kids born after 1995 are fucked, right? Yeah. Because just... Well, he makes this metaphor about how if they like wanted to send your kids to Mars at the age of 10 and they didn't require like parental consent, and that growing up on Mars would change them, drastically in unknown ways. Like, would you allow your kids to do that?
Yeah.
But like the thing is that like technology has been crammed down our children's throats, and from an age like younger than 10 now, and like basically like social media makes girls want to off themselves. And for boys, pornography and video games makes them want to off themselves. And so, for me, I guess, I feel like terrible most of the time.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing the hot yoga lately, so that helps. But like, the anxiety and I don't know, depression or whatever, I think it's like ubiquitous among the millennial generation. And so, I'm always trying to like figure out like what the source of this crazy wound is. Maybe it's just the goddamn technology has infiltrated my brain. And I was born in '88, but we got a computer like with the internet, I think in the 4th grade or something like that, and it's been like nonstop with it since then. So. I don't know,
It's
but
been a virtual flood time to pornography, has it?
Basically.
What are you gonna say?
I don't know. On the other hand, though, I mean, we do a lot of bitching about our crazy system, and I don't know. See, like if you had gotten a job at, I mean, I think with your gregarious nature or whatever. I mean, you could be, if you had been grinding out at AAA for like 10 or so years, I mean, you're smarter than most of the people there and more well-spoken. I mean, you could be like in upper management at this point.
Perish the thought. Good Lord.
Well, I mean, it would be wretched, but I mean, you could easily be making, mid, like between 100 and 200K, I think, at this point, if you had applied yourself for the past like 15 years. And so... I don't know, like they're all this like crazy bitching and like doomsaying and whatnot. I don't know, like I can't quite resolve it. I see it from both sides, I guess. I don't know, like the anxiety, right, is this fear of like what's going to happen rather than like what's right in front of you.
Yeah.
And like what's right in front of me, well, we're just in this I don't know, I've got an apartment, you can see the water from here. I'm really like as blessed as anyone could possibly be, right? I mean, I just work a job that's like, I don't know, I just go in front of the computer and do some stuff now. Like I've switched roles at my venerable insurance and company basically. And so I really don't know like what the stress and anxiety is like all about, right? But I mean, obviously like Disney World now, I don't know what particular theme park they're on about. All these things, like all the restaurants here in Portland have closed and been replaced by ones that cater to expensive tourists coming through on cruise boats. And everything is trying to cater to, well, where the money is, which is these upper class people who somehow have disposable income. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. That's my story.
I think you really drove a stake into the heart of the vampire there with the commentary about 1 to 200K a year. Let's just say 100K is the border. You really can't. It's going to be tough to live in southern Maine on less than 100K. Like it's going to be hard to get there's a lot of people who already owned houses prior to 2020, and they can probably be fine making less than 100K. But in order for any young families to move into, in order for any young people to move into a family situation, you're basically going to need 100K, just given the cost of rent and child care and health care and education. I mean, people have student loan. That was my story. I have all these student loan debts. So, I mean, even making 100 or 200K. By now, I could have made a big difference at 200K if I was making 200K in student debt. But the point is that, like, if you don't give people, like, how are you going to, if you're making enough at your job to get by, but not enough to flourish, then you're really kind of stuck in you're stuck in a whirlpool. You're stuck in a cul-de-sac, just going round and around, not getting anywhere. But I don't think that's how you see yourself, right? I just noticed that we lost the other Coffee by Design this past week, had to close down, right? Because you have to live so far outside of town to be able to afford any kind of rent on a barista salary that they can't find any workers. And indeed, that was my experience working for the school departments here and around Portland. They only have so much budget. There's only so much tax coming in from the property taxes. They only have so much budget for the schools, and so they're looking for people to come in and work for $55, $65K. And I had the bizarre experience of being a temp worker at the city of Portland and then having them offer me less than the temp agency was to stay on as their permanent worker. You're like, the math doesn't work out. That's just silly. But I feel like you don't feel like locked out of home ownership, right? That's not the way you view your life. But you do. But do you feel like you are, like, when you get home from work, do you feel like you've helped people or like have done a hard day's work, or is there any satisfaction at all to just manipulating numbers on a spreadsheet and then going home? Like, I mean, is that any part of why you feel the way you do you think? Or I'm trying to lay this package at the door of the structure of our economic system, this package of why your day-to-day experience is so unsatisfactory. And so I'm just wondering if you agree. Like, if you were an EMT and you were helping people who were bleeding out or doing something that obviously benefited people versus manipulating numbers on a spreadsheet, like, would you feel differently? Or do you already feel like you're helping people? Like, does this sound like it could be the source of the anxiety or depression? Or do I sound like I'm totally talking about a separate thing and that that this condition would persist even if you had a house?
I mean, if I had a house, I don't think it would solve my problem.
If you help people in the day-to-day, would that solve your problem?
Maybe. I mean, it is kind of a poverty of meaning that's the issue. So, I mean, just grinding away on insurance claims on the back end, I suppose it's not the most fulfilling. So,
yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, though, I mean, I had the anxiety like long before I worked at. I mean, it's basically since puberty, right?
Since puberty, huh? Yeah, that was when our parents got divorced. Is that what's going to be the thing for you?
I don't know, maybe. Well, I mean, I'm sure it has something to do with it, but I don't know. I wonder, like, how much, like, I guess it's a lot of things.
Yeah, probably trying to find a single answer, and maybe just that may just be too simplistic to really have an application in the real world, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the fundamental pain is like it's some kind of like social problem, I guess, is what.
Yeah.
But and so like what drives that? I don't know. It's a big complicated question. I don't know. It's a big question to dive into right here.
You got to be comfortable in your own skin, and you have to have you just have to have enough inside to kind of fill up your skin. You know, it's kind of like one of those half-inflated pool toys or something. It's like if you feel like good about your job or you feel satisfied at the end of the day, and people can sense that off of you, and you get better social outcomes through that. But I don't know. I could just be reaching at straws here to try to lay all of these problems at the feet of a deteriorating capitalist system. But I just feel like every other rock I look under is always the same centipede under there, and that's the structure of our corporate bodies. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm reaching here.
There is like this maladaptive lifestyle, and I mean, probably the ultimate solution would be like in a tribe out in the woods hunting buffalo, right? Mm. And so I guess we're all gonna adapt to our crazy new age existence here, with differing levels of success. And so, I mean, I guess I'm most inclined to probably blame just the access to technology and like computers and phones and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or maybe worse, make everything. I don't know. That's a big chunk of it at any rate.
Yeah. Well, there's I feel like technology could be deployed in a way that is super friendly to people, or technology could be deployed in a way where it's trying to capture every second of your attention it possibly can, so it can cram advertisements down your throats and turn a few extra dollars at the end of the quarter for some happy CEOs to report to their respective boards of directors. Imagine if technology was deployed in a way that had you shut it off after a healthy amount of time, or it encouraged you. It wasn't trying to encourage addiction, in other words. It was trying to encourage a healthy engagement with it. Like if Facebook was actually trying to connect you with your high school friends and your college chums instead of trying to cram content down your throat until you choke on it. I gotta think that people's dopamine systems are just being blown out by this thing. But I find that that's also not just looking at your life from an outside perspective, like from an objective perspective. I just don't feel like the capitalistic way the tech has been deployed is sufficient either to explain your wretched condition here. It is going to be like a constellation of different things, I think.
Sure. Well, anyway, so I guess ultimately there's this question of like whether our society is like terrible or not, right? I suppose is the question we're trying to get around, and I don't know. I mean, are we just supposed to say that it's like terrible and like dwell in the misery? Then is that what you're suggesting? Or
after what? You enlighten us as to the latest ravings of the renegade Canadian professor Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, I shall suggest an actual solution. And I do think that spreading awareness of the actual constructive solution is, versus just belly aching and bitching about the truly horrible state our society has fallen into. Proposing an antidote is an important part of the equation, but yes, you're not saying you're wrong.
Well, now that I'm back in the office, and just handling insurance claims somewhat mindlessly, I've been listening to a lot of Jordan B. Peterson on little YouTubes. He was just offering some pieces of advice, and one of them is just try to do better today than yesterday, and not compare yourself to other people, right? I mean, it seems like pretty good advice. Although I guess maybe part of the challenge is I'm not sure what to do. Are they sort of a plateauing feeling? Or how do I make more progress? Like in what way? I don't know. It's part of why I bought a plane ticket to Prague, but that trip's not for like 4 more months, right?
Yeah, well, hang on for 4 more months, dude. I do think that I can confidently speak for our multitude of system failure listeners and suggest that we are all going to be very excited to hear how differently you sound once you get back off the plane from Prague. Yeah, it's going to be wicked.
Travel is a good feeling. I mean, and the other thing he was saying is, none of us are going to make it out alive. Yeah. And so you might as well go all in. So I guess that makes sense. It's just, it seems like more good advice from old JP there. Yeah. Some people don't like Jordan Peterson, but, and I guess the fringes of his like philosophy or whatever, sometimes it gets a bit weird. But most of his advice is, just like that, basically. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what the problem with Jordan Peterson is.
Yeah, well, I love that Kermit the Frog sounding, renegade professor. I think he's got a lot of. He's not right on everything. His persistent confusion surrounding the definition of Marxism continues to be a major hole in his overall tapestry that he weaves. But I think we are all a lot better off for having JBP making the rounds than we would be without. So when you were on the Drew and the Adam and Drew show, Carolla's advice to you was like something about when you're busy, like when you're burning calories, when you're biking up that hill. I think that was what he used, right? Biking up the hill. It's been a while since I've heard this, but like biking up a hill, you don't have time for like existential angst, right? You're just focused on chugging up that hill. And so I really do think that, and we've said it on this pod before, but I think for most of history, people had, they had 8 kids and 2.5 of them survived, to age 10. And so I think it was just one thing after another with dealing with all those kids and the life on the farm and all this. I think all this would just keep you occupied and just keep you engaged in something that, in achieving small but meaningfully goals, all from sunrise to sunset. And it's just, everything is so automated now. You can just easily get food. You just go to work and do some abstract task. Then you get some takeout food, and then you're left with 4 or 5 hours at night to just go, all right, what am I doing here? Yeah. So in short, it used to be the case that kids would automate that sense of that star that would navigate you. And now most people don't have that.
Yeah, the hill is like, it's much less clear, like which way to pedal.
Yeah. Everyone needs some kind of a cause to die for, right? Because like JBP said, we're not getting out alive, so you need some kind of a cause. And I think that was mostly found automatically with children, but now people are having kids so late in life that virtually to a person, people are plagued with a black cloud of dismal depression and a miasma of hopelessness. And I do feel like a big chunk of that has to do with the way we've structured our capitalist economic system, for sure. So I don't know. Yeah, interesting stuff, man. That's pretty wild. And then to further inject this idea of capitalism versus Marxism into the discussion, I now propose to read to you, Brian, a admittedly somewhat lengthy but fascinating quote about communism, which appeared on the Twitters this week from our dear friend Dr. Eric Weinstein, who, as I always say, is the smartest person that I can understand. Once they get any smarter than I'm hitting about 50-60% with Dr. Weinstein, and anyone smarter than him, I'm just totally lost. So it's like, yeah, he's the benchmark for where someone's intelligence starts to lose me in the fog of war. I'm guessing you must have the same experience listening to Weinstein speak. Some of the things make sense, and others you have no idea what he's talking about. I don't know. That's what it sounds like to me. But
he's able to say some very relatable things that no one else really talks about. Like the kayfabe's like a great example, and he just doesn't quite know how to deliver it, which is interesting. But
yeah. His story is that he had struggled in high school, has dyslexia, had a learning disorder, but clearly there's an underlying genius in there somewhere. And so but the way he expresses ideas is very hard for someone with a brain like mine to like. He just seems to jump from thing to thing. We just got to build that pyramid much slower and spend a lot of time in the lower blocks for dummies like yours truly, so we can, when we get to the peak of the pyramid, I know where we are. And he often just zooms ahead, I feel like. But let me read you this interesting quote about communism and its relevance to the 2024 election.
This is a lengthy one.
It's a bit lengthy, so y'all going to have to hear my drone for just a second. It's not that bad, but I think you'll find this is fascinating stuff here. All right. Dr. Weinstein says, one of the most important forces shaping the current U.S. presidential election is not being sufficiently discussed: communism. Because the Democratic Party does not view itself as in any way communist, you can't have a discussion about the role that communism is playing in support for Donald Trump. How can a Wall Street-friendly party favored by large institutions be communist?
That's hilarious, by the way. How it's really on point.
Yeah. How can a Wall Street-friendly party favored by large institutions be communist? Okay. Begin by just stipulating that this is true for the sake of argument, whether or not you agree with it. For the moment, imagine that you see all DEI as Marxist and Maoist. Imagine you see AOC and the Squad as communists. Imagine that what you see in terms of social justice or wokeness or postmodernism or gender-affirming healthcare or Palestinian genocide or Soros Open Society initiatives or progressive DAs or anti-whiteness or defund the police is straight-up precursor to violent revolutionary Marxism. The people crossing over to the cause of Trump with enormous checkbooks see exactly the way I have described the above paragraph. You can pretend that this isn't so. Maybe they won't admit it to you or do so in public. But the stark truth is that what is driving a lot of surprising support for Trump and the Republicans has nothing to do with either. It's not all about Trump or the GOP. It's about Marx, Mao, Stalin, and Lenin. I noticed the good doctor has misspelled Lenin here. For shame, sir. It is the idea that revolutionary Marxism is a dangerous brain cancer that's always trying to get a foothold among the weak. The idea that is everywhere is this: the Democratic Party of the United States thought they could play with rebranded revolutionary Marxists as if the new communism were merely a form of socially conscious pro-market, pro-democracy liberalism, when it is instead a communist Trojan horse philosophy. It has as its aim destabilizing and destroying our culture, the United States, and then the world. This isn't a culture war. It is the takeover of the United States by hardcore revolutionary neo-Marxists who have come for your newspapers, universities, public schools, and your children. The leaders who think they can reach out to progressive voters do not realize they are dancing with the devil who will outplay them. And that was all a quote of the things we were supposed to consider as if it's true, even though we may not believe it. So that's the end of the quote. Does that sound silly to you? Back to Dr. Weinstein's regular voice here. Does that sound silly to you? Great. Glad to hear it. And if so, you've absolutely no idea what is being discussed by many of the world's smartest, most powerful, and most influential people constantly. Why is this confusing? Well, no one I know sees Joe Biden as a communist. They don't even see the Democratic Party leadership as communist. They view the party as opportunistic and naive in thinking that Democrats can allow violent pathological revolutionaries into the big blue tent with a simple coat of blue paint and a bargain basement rebrand to deconstruct the patriarchy and decolonize, defund, and otherwise reform our society while quietly waiting for their real moment. I'm sorry if this sounds funny to some of you who can't imagine opposing Biden for these reasons. If so, it just means you have no clue, as in zero, as to what is going on in a pivotal part of the shift towards Trump. I just wanted to bring this up because it's barely being discussed in the mainstream media. It's the communism, stupid, is the final quote of Dr. Weinstein's here. So, yeah, pretty good, huh?
Okay, so I guess you can tell me if I'm interpreting this right. But, well, so I guess there's like this problem with Marxism wherein it's like this canard. And so, yeah, I guess no one... Well, so he's saying no one associates the Democratic Party or Joe Biden with communism, which I guess I think is right. Although the Democrats kind of are the party of this canard communism, where communism has become this DEI thing,
right?
Where it should be. Well, no one would say that the Democratic Party is the party of the 99%, but they would say they're the party of like DEI, though, right?
Yeah.
So, and that trick there is like. It's like the foible of communism, I think, is that it can be used to prey on the mind of the weak.
In what sense can communism be used to prey on the mind of the weak?
Well, it's that thing I just talked about where people think that the DEI is the communism instead of the 99%.
Okay. Yeah.
And like just people are so easily like race baited or incited to. I mean, well, we've talked about it, but people have completely forgot about the 99% business.
Yeah.
And so that like sleight of hand trick, it's just all they have to do is turn up the temperature a little bit with a terrorist attack, a financial problem, or a crazy virus, and people instantly start going for each other.
Yeah. So yes, that all that sounds about correct to me. There's the idea of Marxism, which is really about the workers owning the means of production. And then there's this boogeyman caricature of Marxism where it's about gender-affirming care for kids or about guaranteeing outcomes instead of guaranteeing equality instead of...
equality of opportunity rather than equality of outcome.
That's the phrase I'm looking for, right?
So
there's this weird DEI caricature that they call Marxist, but nothing to do with actual workers owning the means of production, right?
Yeah. And, well... Wait, so do you agree with Eric Weinstein's sort of take here or not? Or whoa?
I interpret Dr. Weinstein's take as if you do not realize that people are rushing to vote for the Donald because they believe that the Democratic Party is inviting this sinister beast of Marxism, right? Where it starts out as talking about DEI, and that's all well and good, but then it becomes something far worse, like this centralized regime is going to take power. I agree in that sense that there are the flood of support going to the Donald. There is a tiny number of rich people from like Silicon Valley and Wall Street who are opposed to communism because it's going to take the businesses, the huge apparatus of construction and distribution that they get to own, the tiny number of people get to own, and actually put it under some kind of a democratic control, right? Workers own the means of production. So that scares a tiny number of rich people at the top, the 1%, terrified by the actual definition of communism. And then there's the people that they can get to join them in their red tent by not pointing out not admitting that what they really fear is democratic control over the means of production. Instead, what they fear is your children are going to be taken from you and, re-educated as the opposite gender or something like that. Or there's a list of horrible, like obviously a lot about the DEI regime makes no sense whatsoever. And it's the conflation of that with Marxism that means that makes Marxism a huge force in the 2024 election. So this is what I think Dr. Weinstein is trying to spit out here, not suggesting that communism has anything to do with the Democratic Party. They wouldn't describe themselves as communists. They have the same corporate donors from Wall Street, and from Silicon Valley that the Republicans do. The same. So anyway, that's what I think Dr. Weinstein's driving at here.
All right, so to boil it down, he's saying that communism has a lot to do with the election because the Democrats aren't the party of communism, but they are trying to sort of flirt with communism in this. He is sort of acknowledging the crazy sleight of hand trick.
Yeah.
And then the Republicans or the Donald. Well, what's he saying about the Donald with regards to communism?
Well, he didn't mention the Donald specifically, so I would have to put words in Dr. Weinstein's mouth, and I think what he would say is there's a merger going on in the red tent between people who actually fear communism, like the Donald and his corporate donors, and then a whole bunch of people who have no idea what Marxism is but have been told to fear the DEI thing that the Democrats are using instead of Marxism to the Dems are using the DEI to signal to their base, and the Republicans are using that signaling, are calling that signaling Marxism to try to scare their base into voting red, and it just creates this feedback loop.
Okay, well, there's this other thing where I think if you're like a 99%er, I'd probably be more inclined to vote for the Donald than Kamala. So there's also if you're maybe an actual communist, although to me, I don't really think of myself as a communist, but I also like don't get my panties in a bunch over the when it's not like a scary word to me. I'm just not. I just know I'm not going to fall for the sleight of hand trick. So I don't know. I don't think that we necessarily I think if we want to have like the best society possible, right? Here in America, like what we need is like a 99% party, and what we need is a people's bank rather than a private bank running the show. And that's all I really want. I don't really think we need to like socialize insurance companies, which I know you are itching to do. We just need. I think if we did those two things, we could be really on course to kind of being like how things should be.
Well, when you talk about banks, you of course mean currency creation, and that should definitely be something that we all democratically, indirectly through elected officials or some kind of democratic apparatus. But I would just roll risk mitigation right in with the currency creation. It's just like they just make the insurance part of the people's bank. But that doesn't really matter. I do agree that there's a lot of space for private enterprise, especially at the smaller end of the scale, smaller mom and pop joints. They should all be run capitalist. It's just when you get so huge that you're this international conglomerate, I think that there has to be some kind of a transition before you blow up into this monster that's sociopathic with a tiny minority of people controlling it that just eats up the rest of society. There has to be some kind of we've talked many times about Jeremy Corbyn's plan to anytime a business wants to sell itself, it has to first offer itself to its employees. That's a great one. Something like that would really create an atmosphere of democracy, because I just think all of the problems that beset America today are like a lack of democracy. Why are Facebook and Instagram insufferable? Because it's controlled by a board of like 12 people who care only about the profits, and that's their only concern. That's it. They don't know how to make an app work. They don't know where the servers are. They just go to the board of directors meetings or send their proxies in their stead. And the people that make decisions on those basis are going to make terrible decisions, like making the apps addictive or offshoring all of our manufacturing, not just overseas, but onto the shores of our biggest economic rival. When you run down the list of problems besetting society, like the coffee shops all closing, the restaurants all closing here in Portland, or even, and I even tried to fit the football of your ongoing, anxiety and depression, into that window too.
Well, I guess just my feeling is that our American society, we're just so close to having it right. I really don't think it's like a huge adjustment that's needed. I think that's what terrifies the capitalists, right? It's just that we all espouse the value of democracy. It's just like we just have to now just expand democracy to the last shadowy place it hasn't conquered yet, that is the workplace. And we just have to, we apply democracy everywhere else. It's just we got to get that last undiscovered country has to go democratic. Yeah. Well, we've been dealing with some like darkness since 9/11, but I think you'd have to say it really goes back to the assassination of JFK, but they're just like kind of the illusion was stronger, and we really got, after, but they really our reptilian overlords had to expose their scaly hides with 9/11.
Well, I think you're bringing up the JFK assassination in November of '63. That was really when the corporate powers consolidated their control over elected officials. That was the date right there. There'll be no more talk of when the military-industrial complex goes to war, the president plays ball or he gets a bullet in the head.
Okay. Well, anyway, just to bring it back to Eric Weinstein there, I guess the question I want to ask you is, so do you think that Eric Weinstein there understands communism or no? Is what I'm trying to get at. Because, I mean, most people don't see... I mean, obviously, we have a problem with Jordan Peterson's understanding of it, and it seems like basically everyone. So
I don't know. I don't think that... I don't think Weinstein's observation is dependent on him having a clear concept of what communism and socialism and Marxism are. But I think he is right to point out that a huge number of the people voting for the Donald and a huge number of the people cutting checks to the Donald's campaign agree that the Democrats are communists and need to be opposed for that reason. Now, the super donors who write the checks, I think they know that the Democrats aren't really communists, but they worry that the populist party of the 99% to which you alluded earlier, to the extent that the Democratic Party is the populist party or was the populist party, that presents a real danger to them. And now the populist party has shifted to the Republicans, which is really interesting to see. But it's like the Dems haven't done anything for the working class since Carter, and so it's like you can see why people would like, all right, well, we'll try the other side then. And I think Weinstein is quite correct to point out that a lot of the people who are going to vote Republican but aren't themselves oligarchs worry about the communism of the blue party, even though that's just a boogeyman and there's no communism to be found. If the Dems had been doing communist things since the Carter administration, everyone would just be voting for them, right? It would be a distribution of wealth and resources away from those who own the means of production to the regular, like you'd be cutting out a middleman, essentially, cutting out a toll booth in the great cycle of our economy where goods and services are produced and consumed by the great mass of workers. And you just got to get the middlemen out the way when those apparatus of production and distribution scale up.
Well, it's just really bizarre that somehow DEI doesn't mean 99%ism. And we need to do around is give everyone a dope slap because that is it's just crazy. It's just crazy.
That's you want to benefit minorities who have historically been given a tough ride here in America. You want to fix the redlining business where you couldn't get a mortgage as a black person until 1978 or some ridiculous date like that. The best way to do that is to get rid of the middlemen who own, quote unquote, own our massive means of production and distribution. And if we can just get a few of the parasites, a few of the free riders off of this whale carcass, it would swim a whole lot better. That is such an obvious observation that there has to be all this subterfuge surrounding it, this rebranding of Marxism away from democracy to something else. The conflation of capitalism with the free market, right? Capitalism is not the free market. The free market is the rationale for distribution. Capitalism refers to the ownership structure of the corporations that do the producing. So the conflation of capitalism with the free market and with democracy itself, even though nothing can be less democratic than having massive apparatus of production into the hands of a tiny number of people. It's like opposite of democracy. So the conflation of capitalism with the free market and with democracy is a desperate ploy to keep people from seeing that the administration of democracy over the means of production would be a way to benefit everyone except for those who own said means of production, and for them it would be a drastic curtailment of their lifestyle. But that they don't want anyone coming to that dangerous conclusion. So that's why we get the boogeyman, the DEI boogeyman, called Marxism instead of the notion of democratic oversight over the means of production.
All right. Well, maybe we can leverage our interview with Dr. Michael Hudson into an interview with Dr. Eric Weinstein. That would be insane.
Well, next on our list, we should track down Dr. Stephanie Kelton, Dr. Richard Wolff, and Dr. Steve Keen from the University of Melbourne, Australia. These are the heavy hitters, along with Dr. Hudson, in the firmament of heterodox economics. And orthodox economics have delivered us to a truly fiendish state of play here. So that's why I place my faith in the heterodox economists, who have all kinds of really good ideas. Some of them not so good for the balance sheets of the ultra wealthy. But I think that's something that the 99% can live with, broadly speaking. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that seems like a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, let me invite and entice our myriad listeners to send us an email at nop@substack.com with your thoughts about our rosy interpretation of Marxism. And if you want to read some exciting essays by yours truly, why, then you can log on to nop.substack.com, sign up for the indispensable free weekly newsletter, and check out some other odds and ends we've got on there for your amusement as well. And with that, Brian, what say we bid our listeners a fond adieu until next week, eh?
Yes, adieu.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Keep an eye out on Thursday for the posting of this week's mini.